Good evening. I'm George Latimer, Westchester County Executive, and welcome to the first in our series of Facebook Town Hall conversations. Tonight we're going to have an open conversation about senior citizen issues, and this is an opportunity for you to frame some questions, things that you want to know a little bit more about, and for us to talk about it over the next hour. And as we do a series of these, we're going to be talking about other issues. I think in the next 2 weeks we'll talk about economic development, veterans, women's issues, and a host of different things. So we have a chance to dialogue a little bit, at least in this COVID-19 era when we can't be face-to-face as easily as we'd like to be. So we have to use these electronic means to communicate and keep the dialogue going. Tonight our conversations are going to focus on issues that affect senior citizens. If you'd like to comment and ask a question, you can do so by entering your comment on Facebook underneath this scene that you're seeing right now. Catherine Chaffee, our Director of Communications, is here at the ready. She's going to be looking at each of the different questions. And we're probably going to have far more questions received than we're going to have time to answer them. So we'll try to cluster a couple of them together if they're on the same topic area, answer as many as we can. But if it turns out that your question doesn't get answered, please feel free to email us at communications@westchestergov.com. And we'll try to get direct answers to you in a one-on-one basis. And you're always welcome to give us a call at 995-2910. That's the Office of the County Executive. Myself and the other members of our team here will try to speak with you about any of the issues that are on your mind. And of course, right now we're in a very difficult time. We're beginning now our 6th month under the COVID-19 pandemic. Many of us have been in the house, not been able to go outside. It's probably more true of the senior citizen community than any other demographic, and it's the senior citizen community that's been hit the greatest by the impact of COVID. There's certainly been other demographic groups, people who are African American and Latino, that have been hit in greater disproportion to their population. But we've seen COVID-19 deeply affect people ages 60 and over, 70 and over, highest rate of fatalities in that group, highest rate of hospitalizations in that group. So we know that that issue has been an overarching issue for everybody. But underneath that issue are issues that never go away: concern over taxes, concern over transportation, basic access to health care that may not relate to COVID-19. And, most of the time politicians try to say, well, I understand what you're going through. I actually do. I'm 66 and a half years old, a little more than that now. I'll be 67 in a couple of months. So I too am in the senior citizen club. I'm in the front end of it, and there's a lot of folks who are much more advanced in age and are feeling some of the pressures of being more senior citizens. But we're all in the same boat together, and we're not getting out of this boat, you and I, at any point in time from here on in. So hopefully we'll find some solutions together as we go forward. I do want to thank the members of the Board of Legislators. I want to thank as well my executive team, Ken Jenkins, the Deputy County Executive, Joan McDonald, our Director of Operations, and a host of other people who are part of the decision-making process of the county government. It's not a one-man band, and it's not a matter of one individual's personality. I am fortunate to have the opportunity to lead the county government, but there are many other fine people, and the combination of their work together is hopefully how we respond to these issues as we go forward. So with that, we do have some questions that have come up in the queue. Catherine Chaffee, our Director of Communications, she is nowhere near being a senior citizen. So she'll be able to provide some of the questions, and we'll try to answer them straightforwardly. Catherine?
Great. So we've gotten a number of questions about how the county will work to guarantee that seniors in nursing homes and assisted living facilities will be able to vote in this election.
Well, first of all, the whole process of voting is under the control of the Board of Elections. And the County Board of Elections, although the word county is in it and it's part of the county budget, does not directly report to either the county executive or the Board of Legislators. The County Board of Elections reports directly to the State Board of Elections. So most of the things I'm going to talk about now represent issues that are decided outside of our authority, but these are the factual situations. First of all, the election that's coming up on November 3rd is not the only election at hand. If you're watching this and you live in one of the villages of Westchester County, there are village elections coming up 2 weeks from today, Tuesday, September 15th. And there are some competitive races in Bronxville, in Scarsdale, and Tuckahoe. There are other villages where they don't have a competitive race, but there are names on the ballot. The election that almost all of us are thinking about is the presidential election and the other seats that are on the ballot that's coming up on November 3rd, Tuesday, November 3rd, and that's just about exactly 2 months from today. The voting in nursing homes has traditionally been done by members of the Board of Elections that will go to the nursing home on a date prior to the election and then take absentee ballots within the nursing home. That's not going to be possible this year. So now we're reaching out to all of the different nursing home administrators to provide them with absentee ballots, mail ballots, so that those individuals who are in nursing homes can vote by mail, and that those ballots can be collected and then sent into the Board of Elections so they're counted in the election. If you are watching this in a nursing home, or if you have a loved one in a nursing home, then talk to the administrator of that nursing home, call their office and say, what are your provisions for absentee ballots for everybody who is in the nursing home. Some of the nursing homes are very small, some are much larger, but that is the mechanism by which this year people in nursing homes are going to vote. And for those of you who are seniors who are watching this who are not in nursing homes, you also can fill out an absentee ballot and vote by mail. You can vote early in the 10-day period prior to Election Day. There'll be voting hours that begin Saturday a week before the Tuesday Election Day, and those are defined dates that we put out on our various social media for you. And then, of course, on Election Day itself at the local polling places in your area. So if you're able to vote in person, early voting is a very good choice, just created a couple of years ago. Election Day voting, of course, the traditional way that we voted for many years, but absentee ballot has been made available by the governor, who has indicated that because of the COVID-19 epidemic, we are all eligible to vote by mail, not just those that have a specific illness or a specific injury.
Okay. The next question comes from Jane, who lives in Hastings. She writes, I'm approaching 73 years of age and have been living in Hastings for over 25 years. I consider it my home. Although my children have been out of the school system for almost 20 years, I have continued to pay school taxes. I will no longer be able to afford to do so once I stop working and are no longer able to work. She asks, what stipulations can be made for those of us who would like to spend our final years here in our homes? For example, paying school taxes for 25 years after your children are out of the school system and then becoming exempt from paying future taxes.
Well, Jane, and for anybody else who questions the school taxes, let's talk a little bit about property taxes in general. There are three different levels of government that levy property taxes that make up the 100% of what you pay. If you talk to somebody and you ask them how much you pay in property taxes, they won't break it down by component piece. They'll give you a general number. So let's say the general number is $20,000. Generally speaking, you pay about 2/3 of that amount to your local school district. So for the sake of this discussion, if it's a $20,000 total that you pay in taxes, you pay $13,000, slightly more than that, to your school district. And then depending on what municipality you live in, the city of Yonkers, or in this case, the village of Hastings, you would pay local taxes. Now, if you live in a city, you only pay city taxes. If you live in a village, there's a village tax with a little town piece, not that great. If you live in a town, separately, you pay town taxes. That's about 25% of your bill in round numbers. And then the remainder of that amount, that's about 20%, I should say, about 25%, the remainder amount is county property taxes. So what we control here in Westchester County government is the county property tax bill. And as I said, that's about 25% of your total tax bill. So if you pay $20,000 a year, you're paying $5,000 to Westchester County, a little bit less than that probably to the village of Hastings and the town of Greenburgh, maybe $3,500, and the bulk of the rest is paying to the school district. The state of New York governs the school districts. The county does not, the village does not, and so forth. This past year in our property taxes, we actually cut property taxes for the first time in 9 years in Westchester County. It was a reduction of $1 million countywide, and in some communities, based on equalization, they had more or less of a tax cut or a tax freeze. But it's still a small portion of your taxes, as is true for the village. Schools are governed and run through the state government. So if there's going to be, as Jane suggests, a freeze or an elimination of your school tax, then that would have to come by state discussion. But let's be clear, schools are not just a user fee. When I go to a location and I pay for whatever service I get, that's a user fee. But schools are part of a societal benefit, the benefit of education that lifts all tides. So as much as it would be a positive for those of us who don't have kids in the school district, and my daughter left the public school district in 2003, so like you, I'm now 17 years without a child in the school district. My grandchildren are growing up in another state. I'm not paying school taxes because I have a kid in school. I'm paying a school taxes so that we have an education system across the board. Now, the size and the scope and the amount of money you pay in school taxes is an issue that can be dealt with to some degree by the local school district, but even more so by the state of New York. And I had the chance to serve the state legislature, and there are a variety of different proposals to shift the funding of schools away from property taxes, because property taxes don't necessarily grow with your ability to pay them. The income tax burden that you pay is based on your ability to pay. If you make more money, you pay more taxes. If you make less money, you pay less income taxes. That has always been seen as a fairer way to pay for a larger portion of school taxes. But at this moment right now, the county government is not with any authority to adjust your school taxes. We have to work on the county tax side of it. We're going to go into a budget season now into the fall, and we're going to try to do the very best we can, given the pandemic and the financial problems that all governments are facing, to do what we can do to keep the property taxes low, certainly at the tax cap level, and if not below that, if we can get it to zero, and if we can get it below zero, Jane, we will try to do that at the county level. The larger picture, though, is very true. New York is an expensive place to live. So is Massachusetts, New Jersey, and Connecticut. And that's why when you go to some of the low-tax states in the South, you'll see many people, when they reach the end of their earning years, move south where taxes are low. Keep in mind, services are low as well. When you move to Florida, you didn't move to Florida during the years where your kids were going to school, because New York's got a better education system than Florida does. And New York has more services that you might need in those years. We have mass transit to get you to work every day in New York City. Florida doesn't have that. So keep in mind, the advantage of Florida becomes an advantage because you've reached a certain age, and they've structured a state, and North Carolina has as well, with very low taxes and very low services. And that is something maybe that we need in our senior years, but not necessarily something we need in the main years of our life. We will try to lower county property taxes, which is the tax that's within our authority.
Okay, great. We just got a comment on Facebook, which I think is something worth addressing. So Linda says, not getting a proper census count will hurt all of us big time and hit us right in the wallet. Can you talk a little bit about why it's so important for our seniors to fill out the census?
Well, it's important for our seniors and for everybody, frankly, to be counted in the decennial census, meaning every 10 years. And interestingly enough, and this is not something I knew, a number of years ago, the need for a census every 10 years was established in the original founding of the American government. In the Constitution, there is a reference to a decennial counting of all the residents of the United States. So this isn't something created at some point in time in the last 50 years or 100 years. This has been going on since the beginning of the Republic. Counting the number of people may seem like a numerical activity, but there are so many things that are parceled out in terms of grants or benefit programs based on the population. And we'll use simple examples here. In Yonkers, you have a city that could have 200,000 people in it. But if only 190,000 fill out the census, when it comes time for grants on any number of different issues, money to fix the roads, money to help the schools, money from the federal, the state government, sometimes from the county government, it's parceled out based on how many people benefit. Well, 190,000 is the number legally that Yonkers has, but in fact, there's probably 200,000, maybe more than that, in the city of Yonkers. And the same is true in a number of different communities that have a big undercount. So the more we get counted, the more accurate the number of people we have, the more likely it is that when those communities compete for money, which if it doesn't go to us, is going to somebody, and it's not going to Westchester, it's going off to Nebraska or some other place, having an accurate count is essential. I'd also mention that it also affects your proportionate involvement in legislative races where you have equal number of people in districts. If you happen to live in the city of Yonkers or the city of New Rochelle, you have districted councils, meaning 6 council districts, each of those 2 cities, divided by equal population per district. For everybody in Westchester County, you're represented by a county legislator, and each county legislator has a district that should be of equal population, so we have equal votes. 55,000 people, roughly, is a round number, equals a county legislative district. But if there's an undercount in a community, then you are disproportionately underrepresented because you don't have sufficient number of votes in order to reach that maximum number. That's also true for the state assembly, for the state senate, and for the U.S. House of Representatives. So there's a political representation benefit as well as a grantsmanship benefit that comes from filling out the census. I did the census online. I'm a senior citizen, as I just said. It's very simple. It takes less than 10 minutes to do it. You can do it online right now. I believe it's my2020census.gov. my2020, the number census.gov. If you fill it out, it asks you some questions, does ask you questions about income level, does ask you some questions about demographics, does not ask for your social security number, does not ask for your mother's birthday or some code by which identity stealing could occur. And don't be fooled by scams. It's an official 2020 census document that you'd see. And, you could fill it out quickly and you could be, part of the portion of Westchester that's been counted. And we hope you'll do that.
So first, let's just thank Elizabeth, who commented on Facebook. She said, excellent answer and explanation about school taxes, Mr. Latimer. So just thank you, Elizabeth, for listening. The next question is coming from Lynn. Lynn lives in Massachusetts, but her parents live here in Westchester and have lived here since 1965. She asks, in my neck of the woods of Massachusetts, we have something called the Ride, which transports seniors and the disabled around the Boston metro area for a small fee. Can Westchester have something similar?
Well, we have a couple of different things, and it depends on where her parents live for some of these services. First of all, we have a paratransit system that's run as part of the Beeline bus system, and that provides transportation for people, not only seniors, but primarily seniors who are disabled. And if you're unable to drive your own car, you're unable to move about, and you have to apply for this and get the benefit necessary, but you're eligible for paratransit, and that is pick up at your door. It has a kneeling bus entrance, so you can enter even if you're handicapped. If you have a walker, if you're in a wheelchair, there's a capacity to cover you in a wheelchair. So if you're in that level of concern, physical health disability, the paratransit system can work for you. Separate from that, there are a number of different organizations. They may be analogous to what the Ride is in Boston. I'm not familiar with their particular program. But we have a number of aging in place organizations around Westchester County. And they're voluntary organizations that have been created, and they're not everywhere. But they can provide that kind of extra transportation that she's looking at for her parents to be able to get around. As you do get older, your mobility starts to decrease for lots of reasons, your vision, your reflexes, and so forth. I remember we went through that with my dad when he got to a certain age and wasn't able to drive anymore. But those aging in place organizations are located in different parts of the county. Gramerton Village is the name of the organization that serves the Bronxville area, some of the area around Bronxville. At Home on the Sound is an aging in place group that's based in Larchmont and Mamaroneck. There's a group called SPRYE, acronym SPRYE, stands for Staying Put in Rye and Environs, and that's Rye, Harrison, Portchester, Rybrook, and Rye. And there's some others, the White Plains, New Rochelle Cares, and those organizations will also be able to provide some transportation assistance. There's two places. I don't think our friend from Massachusetts is watching tonight. If she is, you can contact our Office for Senior Services for Westchester County Government. I don't know if we have the number available up on the screen. The general number for Westchester County is 995-2000. And if you dial that number and you ask for any department of county government, you'll get connected. And then, of course, you have specific numbers for senior services. So call senior services on behalf of your parents and identify their location and their need, and that could be helpful. And then also, I would call in the local community that you live in, the local seniors office. Almost every community has a senior program in their community. They almost always have either a nutrition program or at least a social program for seniors, and they differ in every community. New Rochelle has programs at the Hugh Doyle Center. Cortland has them at the Muriel Morabito Center up on Westbrook Drive. You have them in the Field Library in downtown Peekskill. You have them at the Portchester Senior Center, which is part of the complex where Village Hall is in Portchester. Those are 5-day-a-week programs, and there are transportation attachments to that to bring you from your home to the senior center. And at the senior center, you can have nutritious lunch, and you can participate in some of their activities. Bingo is a staple. There's also arts and crafts programs. So that is a transportation element that's also available to you. So depending on where you live, call the local senior office in your community. Go to the website, look at your town, village, or city website. Look for senior programs. If they're not standalone, they're usually under the recreation department. And you'll find somebody there who can help you, tell you about what's available.
Okay. So we got a number of questions generally asking where seniors can go to get information that they need about benefits, resources, and just generally improve their quality of life.
I think the answer to the last question really is the answer to this question as well going forward. We have a county-wide department of senior services and programs. May Carpenter is the head of it. She's been head of it for a number of years. She was in that position when I came into office and kept me in that position because she's very capable. She has a very good staff. They're based out of our county office building in Mount Vernon, but they operate all across the county. And they have a good idea of the variety of different programs. And what it comes down to is, what is the help that the individual needs? Now, we've talked about transportation. Sometimes if a person is poor, they get into the winter season and they may be without heat. Well, there are programs through DSS, if you're eligible, that can provide you some resources to get oil if you have an oil heating system, or pay a utility bill if that's what's a problem, if that's the problem. And so generally speaking, if you call the Senior Services and Programs Office, you can talk about what you need, and they'll talk about what kind of programs exist. And you try to match up to geographically as well as in terms of topic area. And then, as I said just a second ago, I'm repeating myself, but it's worth repeating. Call in your local community the senior programs in your community. Different programs have, different communities have different programs and different services. Some do more. Some do, a more minimal level of services, but wherever you live, you can connect to what those programs are. And then if there's a particular need that you have that doesn't sound like it's being addressed by the things we have, then drop me a note. You can communicate to me, G. Latimer at westchestergov.com. That's my office as county executive. And we'll try to find out what is the specific need you have if you live in Pound Ridge, if you live in Irvington, if you live in Pelham, if you live in White Plains. And try to connect you that way. But one of the big difficulties, and I find this to be true for myself as well. I'm still in my work years, so I still try to stay up to date with technology. There's a world of information at our fingertip through technology, but not everybody is comfortable going on a computer or going on a smartphone and researching it on their own. And it's difficult. The technology, we didn't grow up with it. I lived, 45 years until they had fax machines. Then you add another 10 years until we started having email routinely all over the world and all over our backyard. So for many of us, it's hard to deal with the technological issues. And so therefore, the information is there, but you have to know how to access it. But if you don't have the ability to do that, use your telephone. That's technology we've all mastered. Call your local community senior programs. They'll be able to give you a good head start.
Okay. Evictions and foreclosures are on the rise. Seniors are facing both without the knowledge and the information they need. Seniors are also very concerned about the lack of affordable housing. What is the county doing to address affordable housing needs for seniors?
Well, two issues, evictions and affordable housing. On affordable housing, we're working very hard because we accept the need for affordable housing. There's always been a philosophical, you could argue a political debate about affordable housing, and some folks don't think that is a valuable use of resources to try to get the cost of housing down so some people can afford them. But we believe that there is a need. We've been working on a variety of projects. We use county money, we solicit state funding, some federal funding in order to provide affordable housing in as many units as we can. A year ago, we opened up a 41-unit project in Rye, the Vienna Senior Housing Program. It was begun under my predecessor, but the opening of the doors came during my tenure. This November, we're going to be opening up a senior housing facility. But we helped the developer develop a 34-unit building on South Regent Street in Portchester, targeted for seniors, rent subsidies so that you can afford to be there, and beautiful facility. We did an update from that location a couple months ago while they were still working on the construction phase. They're almost done now and ready to rent up. We're working right now in a 75-unit building over right outside the campus of the Westchester Community College in the town of Greenburgh. That was the old West Help project. It laid fallow for 8 years or so, and now it's going to come back online with 75 units of affordable senior housing. Now, the need for senior housing is multiples of that. But, we're doing what we can do. We need to be able to find land that we either own or can obtain. We need to be able to find a qualified developer that knows how to get the housing built and can put the whole portfolio of financing and everything together. We need some help from the state government and the federal government to help subsidize costs so that we can build it at an affordable level. Market rate housing, when you see things going up near the train stations in White Plains and Yonkers and New Rochelle, those rental apartments are over $3,000 a month. That's far from affordable for a senior or a regular family under normal economic situations. So that's why we as a county government try to invest money in land acquisition. We invest money in certain kinds of programs to be helpful to them. So that's what we're doing in terms of affordable housing. Here in our office, Blanca Lopez is our point person on affordable housing. She works directly with Norma Drummond, who's our commissioner of planning, who is involved with these housing programs. You can reach Blanca at 995-2900, our general number. And depending on where you live in the county and where you're interested in trying to seek out senior housing, we'll let you know what kind of projects we're working on. But it's not enough. And of course, you recognize now that our generation, the baby boom generation, is now a senior citizen generation. And we were, at the time, the largest demographic generation. There's a lot of us that were born in the post-World War II era. So the demand for affordable housing is tremendous. And even though there are many people in the senior age category in Westchester County that are affluent and don't need affordable subsidized housing, there are still just as many or more that do. But those are the actions that we're trying to take. On the eviction prevention side, we know we're going to face a tsunami of evictions whenever the governor lifts his ban on evictions. Right now, as we sit here today on the second day of September, the governor's ban is still in effect, and he has not set an end date for when those evictions can start to happen. And if a person is being, they feel, harassed by their landlord, even if they're in a situation where they owe back rent, the no eviction procedures can advance at this stage of the game. So obviously, if you can get representation, you should do that. If you can't, you can reach out to Legal Services of the Hudson Valley, and there are other community organizations in the community that you live in that will help represent people in a situation like this. But you should get, if you're under threat of eviction, you should get some legal assistance. Don't go into this thing using common sense and in a legal procedure. We're way in over our head if we're trying to do it casually. We have to be very specific and follow the rules that the court system has laid down. But at this point in time, there are no evictions that are authorized. So if someone threatens you and says, I'm going to move your furniture out to the curb tomorrow if you don't give me so much money, they're taking an illegal act. Even if you're behind in rent, there's still a procedure by which one has to go through before eviction. So if you do face eviction, then please, by all means, reach out to us, reach out to one of those not-for-profit agencies. I've mentioned Legal Services, there are others, and try to get some help to defend yourself in this situation.
The next question comes from Linda in Yonkers. She is a senior homeowner and has no affordable means of getting her snow removed in the winter. She wants to know if the county can have a program where the county taxes would cover snow removal for seniors.
Well, unfortunately, Linda, we don't, again, you have to know what the county government is legally tasked with doing. And in the particular area that you raised, that falls to the local government, in your case, the city of Yonkers, to do it. Some communities have established programs like that. Some not-for-profit organizations voluntarily do that. So I'm afraid I'm going to have to direct you to the Yonkers senior programs and have a conversation with the folks down at Yonkers City Hall to determine if that can be done. The county government is a regional government, and we provide, this is more general now, we provide the regional services that the local governments don't provide. So we will run a bus system because not every community would have their own public bus system. We run a county jail because not every municipality, not any municipality can have the resources to incarcerate people that need to be incarcerated. We're co-operators of a community college, which has branches all across the county, but again is a regional function. Our public health department responds to pandemics and other types of outbreaks, communicable diseases. We check all the different restaurant kitchens to make sure they're clean. We check the various pools to make sure that there's no pollution in the water and they have the proper pH balance. And I could give you a myriad more things, sewage treatment, you name it. Those are regional functions that the county does. And that's what our primary responsibility is. When somebody has a more localized function, I live in Larchmont. I would like to see a stop sign on the corner of my street, unless it were to be a county road, of which there are some, but not universal. That's really a decision that's made by the village of Larchmont or the town of Mamaroneck or the town of Lewisboro or each of the different municipalities. So it's not bureaucratic buck passing. That's what people always think it is when you say something like this. But if somebody came up to me and said, what do you think our military response in Iraq should be? I mean, it's pretty clear as a county executive, I'm not involved in international military affairs. That's beyond the stripes on my sleeve, and you'd go to your congressman or your United States senator for that. So in the same way, when you have a localized need, in this particular case in Yonkers, something for seniors, you're directed to the local Yonkers senior program to address that.
Okay. We got a number of questions about the COVID pandemic. What are some steps that seniors should take to protect themselves against COVID?
Well, unfortunately, some of these things, our moms told us a long time ago. I've already given out my age, and if my mom were alive, and we just, it was the anniversary of her passing just yesterday, 23 years ago, she'd be almost 100 years old. But what she told me back when I was 6 years old was a significant portion of the advice that we should be practicing right now. The three basic public health needs that we have as individuals, that we do, and you can't expect a police officer to come over and make us do these things. Number one, first and foremost, I can hear my mother saying this to me, wash your hands. Wash your hands, wash your hands. Get the germs off your hands, and in this particular case, the virus won't stick to your hands if you wash them. Soap and water, 20 to 30 seconds. The line is sing the happy birthday song to yourself. If you sing it out loud, try to have a good singing voice. But that will help get anything that's on your hands from getting inside of you, because we do this all the time. I do it all the time. We touch ourselves in the face almost mindlessly, scratch our ears, rub our eyes, and immediately whatever's on our hands, if it's negative, gets inside of our body, and that's where the problems begin. So the first most important thing, you've heard this already, I repeat it, wash your hands with soap and water, or hand sanitize if you can't wash your hands. The second thing is wear a mask. Now, I don't think I like these any more than anybody else does. One of the people that's running the show here has had to wear a mask today, and like me, he bitterly complains about it. But we are intelligent men. And the reason why we wear masks is not to protect ourselves, but to protect the other person. And on the presumption that the other person is also wearing a mask, they're protecting us. So when I put the mask on, if I cough, if I sneeze, if I just breathe, and I have anything, I can't convey it to the person that I'm with. And this is not a political statement. I don't care what party you vote for. That's irrelevant. You wear this as a matter of personal protection, public health protection. That's the second thing you've got to put on your list. The third thing, which is very unnatural for most of us, certainly for me, is social distancing. Not to be too close to other people. Getting into the packed elevator, getting into the packed subway train, being at a street fair festival up close and personal with other people. That's just not smart in this day and age. We've tried to structure some programs at Westchester County, events where you can have fun, but social distance. We've opened up our beaches, we opened up our pools, but we reduced the total volume of people, and we didn't let people get cheek to jowl close, because you can convey the things that way. Now, even with those three things, we still have a certain vulnerability. There is no vaccine for this. There's no antiviral treatment yet. And when medical science has these things, they're going to announce it from the rooftops. But for right now, we're working in an environment where we test, we find out who has it, we isolate those people for 2 weeks. If they don't develop the disease, then they can't spread it to somebody else. If they do wind up being sick in the hospital, we try to treat them properly so that they can recover and get better. In Westchester County, we had a terrible time in the first month and a half of this. When we got the first patient, almost exactly 6 months ago on March 2nd, we wound up in a dire straits in a heartbeat. The virus spread starting from the first patient quickly amongst the people in his world, and then it started spreading all over the place, and we saw, my goodness, we had one case, we had 100 cases, we had 1,000 cases. However, since late April, we've been in a steady decline in the number of cases, and even more importantly, the number of hospitalizations and the number of fatalities. We had, at a peak, 1,200 people hospitalized for COVID, 1,200 people in the hospital sick with COVID. Right now, under 30, and that is good news. We've had an aggregate of 1,450 people, actually 1,452 people, die of COVID-related disease. However, in the last 2 months, that number has dropped down to practically nothing. We go a week, 1 or 2 fatalities. We go a month, 4 or 5 fatalities. We had nights, one night in Westchester County where we lost 50 people in a night. That's incredible, and it's horrific. The system couldn't even handle that much fatality, and it's really a tragedy. And even if you lose one person, that person was loved by somebody. It was somebody's brother or sister, somebody's coworker, somebody's neighbor. And just losing one person is difficult. But the numbers are down dramatically. So being safe, what we're doing is working. And as much as we don't like to wear the mask, as much as I would prefer to greet people warmly, I had a career in sales and marketing before I did this for a living, and I'm a handshake kind of guy, and pat you on the shoulder, give a peck on the cheek to a lady to greet them warmly, but you can't do that now. So those are some of the key specific things to deal with. I think for those of us who are seniors, since we're more vulnerable to this, we have to stay out of places if we can avoid it where there are any kind of combination of crowds, because while you may start out wanting to social distance, you don't know the dynamics of a group and what could happen and how people might move about. So many people have stayed inside. Many people have avoided interacting with anybody outside the home. Hopefully they've all stayed safe. It's worked for them. If you're going out to dinner, an outside option is safer for you than an inside option. Inside is safe if it's socially distanced, but outside is safer. It's a better environment. When I've gone to church, and I'm assuming for those who are of other religious traditions, go to synagogue, mosque, whatever, there's distancing going on in church so that you're not in close proximity to a fellow congregant. All those things are the practical things that we have to do. How long are we going to have to do this? I don't know. Nobody knows. The virus is going to dictate if it comes back in a second wave, if it morphs into something different that we're not immune to. There's any number of things that could happen. But I would say, just to give heart, and to anybody here who's a senior citizen, again, you're probably in my age category, which means we were a little too young to directly remember the Depression or to remember World War II. Our parents' generation were young during the Depression and World War II. And I can remember vividly in my teenage years, growing up in my parents' household, how they talk about those days and the sacrifice they made during the Depression. Both of my parents had to leave school early, did not finish high school, went to work. My dad at a younger age than my mother did. And during the war years, my mother worked in a factory. All women had to put their shoulders to the wheel. Guys, of course, went overseas. And the sacrifice they made, it was over an extended period of time. And I'd hear the stories of sacrifice, and I go, yeah. And I grew up in a working class family, so it wasn't as if we had all the luxuries of life by any means. But I never felt that I had to make some tremendous, huge sacrifice. Now I realize what that sacrifice is. That sacrifice is changes to your lifestyle that you don't particularly care for. And the later we are in life, seniors that we are, we've gotten this far. Why do we have to do this now? Who knows? It's here. And we're going to have to sacrifice. We're going to have to not have the best Memorial Day. We're going to miss having a great Mother's Day. You take mom out to brunch, and it's a wonderful family. You can't do that. So we do those practical things. We manage COVID as best as we can. Medical science will take us the rest of the way.
Okay. We have a question from Carol on Facebook. She says, while I recognize that this relates to the State Department of Health, is there any way the county can put pressure on the governor to open up visitation at nursing homes? We have not been able to visit our 94-year-old mother for 6 months.
We have lobbied very aggressively for the governor to have more open rules for visitation at nursing homes. He did change the rules within the last month that allowed for visitation, but it required that the nursing home have a certain level of COVID infection that dropped over, I think, 28 days, and that's a very hard standard for most nursing homes to make because you are dealing with a large number of people who are elderly, who are sick, and unable to it. We'll redouble our efforts. We will work with our state legislators, in fairness, our senators and assembly members that represent Westchester County. They, too, have been lobbying. I think the governor's looking at the public health side of this and what would happen if people come from outside the nursing home into the nursing home with COVID and reinfect people who are already sick, and then we would have an even greater degree of tragedy. But notwithstanding that, in my judgment, there are ways that you can visit your loved one and be protected in the ways that are necessary. And, I have friends of mine who've reached out to me who have parents in advanced years in the various nursing homes, and it's heartbreaking. A friend of mine whose parent has dementia and really is trying to struggle to maintain her mindset without the ability of her daughter or son to come and visit her. So I understand, what the question is. We'll try our best to try to influence the governor to hopefully make the rules flexible enough to accommodate more visits.
Along the same lines, Jenny asks, any idea when senior centers will start to reopen?
Interesting you mentioned that because we've been doing a call around from our staff to the various senior centers. I've talked to some of them, very recently. I spoke to Liz Rotfeld in Rye Brook. I spoke to Jennifer Ventremille in Tuckahoe, and just to try to get an idea of what's happening out there. Most senior centers are now discussing reestablishing programs beginning October. They kind of want to see what happens in the fall and what kind of programs they can do and which ones they can't do. I know, for example, Westchester has reestablished a twice-a-week program, nutrition programs on Mondays and Thursdays, and then I guess on Thursdays they play bingo, which is the official sport of the senior centers as I've gone to them. But most of them are still thinking about it. So depending on what community you're in, again, call the local community and go from there. Some programs are nutrition programs where they feed individuals 5 days a week. White Plains has that here at the Armory on Mitchell Place. You have it at Lake Isle in Eastchester, and you have it in Mount Vernon at the Armory on the north side of town and the Dole Center on the south side of town. Some senior programs are recreational programs where people go, they have coffee and cake, and they talk socially. That's more the case in North Castle, in both North White Plains and at the Hergen Hans Center in Armonk. That's the case in Tuckahoe at Father Fada Hall on the campus of Assumption Church. So each community is different, and each one is looking at starting up. A couple of them I think are starting up now. Most of them I think you'll see them in business in October, assuming that our level of infection stays low.
Okay. On Facebook, Lynn wrote, just a note to say I'm very grateful to those younger people who are volunteering to work at the polls. And Michael asks he'd love information on how to volunteer to work on Election Day.
Well, if you'd like to be a poll inspector, jot this number down, 995-5700, 995-5700. That is the Board of Elections office. If you live in Westchester County, you can call them, express your interest in being a poll inspector, and then you'll proceed from there. I do have to tell you there are a few basic requirements. Number one, you must be a resident of Westchester County, obvious. You must be a registered voter, and of course that means you have to be 18 years of age or older. You have to be a registered Republican or Democrat. And I know that strikes people. Why do you have to be in one of the two major political parties? Because the state structures the Board of Elections so that there are equal numbers of Republicans and Democrats in charge of the electoral process. So if you go to your polling place and you see 4 people sitting at a table, 2 of them are Republicans, 2 of them are Democrats. The thinking being that everybody keeps an eye on everybody else. And while it's not necessarily hyper-partisan at every single setting, in order for you to be a poll inspector, you must be registered in one of those 2 political parties. And so that's what's at hand. But 995-5700, and we're certainly trying very hard to recruit poll inspectors so that we can open up all of our election polls for this November election. The presidency's on the ballot, and the presidency always gets the greatest turnout. More people vote in that election than in any other. And it's going to be a long day, and you're going to need people who are going to be in for the stamina. But there is a pretty good paycheck. I believe it's $350. It's a long day, but it's $350 if you need the bucks, and you go through some training. It's not a hard job, but you have to be very precise, and you have to do things a very certain way in order to stay within the law.
On Facebook, Robert writes, there was an excellent forum last night with Volunteer New York on hunger. I'm curious what you see as being some of the new ways the county addresses senior community nutrition needs amid the pandemic.
Well, that was an excellent program, and just today I was with Jeanette, who's the new executive director of Volunteer New York. She and Nicole were with us to talk about what we're going to do on 9/11. And she talked about that forum last night, which highlighted that in a county that's as wealthy as Westchester is, with the perception that everybody has an estate with horses in the meadow, that there is tremendous food insecurity in Westchester County. There's a lot of people in need. Under normal circumstances, there's a surprisingly high number, 6 figures of people that don't have a reliable ability to make enough money to obtain the food they need to survive on, and good healthy food, not eating just junk food to fill up calories. The county has done a number of things, and we've worked primarily through Feeding Westchester, which is the parent organization that provides, in part, food to the various local food banks. And there are food banks in almost every community in Westchester County. The program that Volunteer New York spoke of has 12 different locations that are benefiting from the food donations that they expect to get tied around 9/11. And they're in Ossining and New Rochelle and Portchester and White Plains and Mount Vernon and elsewhere around the county. But I do think that the problem is greater now because of the COVID-19 virus. People have lost their jobs. For some people, they're not able to be on unemployment, so they're having no money come in, and going to the local food bank to get enough food for a week for a family of four, family of six, whatever that is a difficult thing to worry about every day. And for people in certain industries, certainly the restaurant industry comes to mind, hotel industry comes to mind, those jobs have just fallen off the table. I mean, it's not like a business went out and you now have to look for a job from another business. There are very few of those restaurants and hotels that are operating and hiring and so forth. But so we do understand the food insecurity problem. We allocate an additional $3 million with a program that we launched. Part of it was feeding Westchester. Part of it was direct assistance to these various local food banks. Part of it was to support a couple of pilot programs. New Rochelle had one using a card function where you could buy food. And we think all of those innovative programs may have some resonance, so we support them, we see how it goes, and we expand them if we can. But I don't underestimate the problem. You can drive through streets with beautiful homes and leafy trees, but there are a lot of people that don't know where their dinner's coming from tonight.
In the time of the pandemic, where people are more focused, or there's more of a need to focus on technology to connect with people, is there anything the county can do to help seniors use technology more effectively, or better understand how to use technology?
That's a good question. I don't think we've covered that as an issue that we have dealt with. What we can do as a county, and that would be, as I said earlier when I said there's certain functions that are localized, some are regional, that would be a legitimate regional function for the county to look into. We'll make a note of it, and we'll talk to a couple of our key people here to determine how we could go about doing some education and maybe some exposure to technology so that people recognize that this is now the lifeline that it is, to be able to do these things on Facebook, on Skype, to talk to relatives, to be able to use not just the email component, but the social media component. That would be a worthwhile, it's a good suggestion. I'm not aware that we have made much of an effort in that area to help educate seniors on technology, and we'll put it on our list of things to do.
Well, we're coming up at almost an hour. We're almost getting close there. So this question comes from Steve, and this is the last question that we have for right now.
Okay.
How can government at all levels, local, state, county, do a better job of identifying the specific needs of a very non-monolithic group we tend to bundle under the heading of senior citizens? It's clearly not a one-size-fits-all solution matrix that is needed, but a finely tuned set of programs that cater to the very differentiated group needs of these groups.
I think, Steve, what we're going through right now, I mentioned the aging in place organizations, reflects what I just alluded to a few minutes ago, which is the changing nature of today's senior citizen. If you look back, and this is something we do through history, we didn't live this experience. When Franklin Delano Roosevelt created Social Security, the retirement age was identified at 65. Most of the jobs in the United States were physical labor jobs, and we were an industrial economy that produced goods and products. And frankly, a lifetime of physical labor by the age of 65 wears out the human body, and many people didn't live all that much longer than that. Maximum median age was 72, 70, age in that category. And of course, individuals live longer or less long. Now we're looking 80 years after that in a very different society. This is a service industry. This is an information industry society, not a manufacturing society. People do a different kind of work, and all of a sudden, where my dad retired at the very age I am now, and he was tired. He worked with his hands all his life. He was head of maintenance for 40 years or so, 35 years after World War II was over, until he retired in the late 70s. And I've had a different kind of life because I served both in the private sector, now in the public sector, in administrative work jobs that used different skills and not necessarily physicality. And so you're seeing seniors live longer, but their needs are different the longer they live. And the needs are also different depending on where they are economically. And so the traditional senior programs that we've had that really dealt with the greatest generation amongst us as they became seniors were programs that said, here's a place you can go during the middle of the day, get a nutritious meal at lunch. You can, meet with, your friends, your colleagues of the same age, play cards, watch a movie, do those kinds of activities. It's a different kind of senior that's hitting 65, 67, 70, 72, and their needs are different. We've identified already some of those needs are common to everybody. Transportation is one, healthcare is one. But the longer we live, and we get into our 80s, late 80s, early 90s, when we do get sick, it becomes very serious in a very short period of time. So the healthcare accessibility has to change. If the population didn't survive much past 72, you didn't live long enough to get certain kinds of illnesses, and you're seeing a higher percentage of dementia or Alzheimer's because you're seeing a greater longevity in age. I know it's true for men that most have said that prostate cancer is so widespread that if any man lives long enough, you'll contract prostate cancer. Why wasn't it the same level of infection years ago? Because longevity didn't take you to 78, 79, and 80 circumstances, and you died sooner. So I think what it does require, as Steve pointed out, is sort of a rethinking of the role of seniors in the society. I think we have to look at seniors rather than 65 as the magic age. Certainly for Social Security, I wouldn't change anything. But I think we have to look at people working later into life in a productive capacity. And that's difficult because the next generation wants to come in and have their opportunity for jobs and careers and so forth. But we have to assume that our generation, senior generation, is going to work a little bit later, going to have to accumulate a little more money because it's going to be that much more expensive to live. And it's expensive to live in Florida too, even if it's less expensive than in New York. And then also to provide different types of recreation. That's what those aging in place groups are doing that were not done by the traditional senior programs in the municipalities. They're having programs that are much more interesting and diverse in the things that you're exposed to. And while you may not be able to drive, you can certainly take trips. We're sitting next to the greatest city in the hemisphere and in the world, in New York City, with tremendous cultural opportunities and so forth, assuming we can intermix with each other. So I do think we need to have a reconsideration of what that program looks like. I think the best delivery for senior services at the level of activities and programs is at the local municipal level. That's where you can cluster people geographically. What we have to do at the next level up and the regional level is provide the services for things like healthcare that are generic for everybody. And I think that's where we look at what we're doing in the state and the federal government together as a partner. But it's certainly important. And if they say that politicians only do things for themselves, well, as I said, I'm a senior citizen. So now I'm coming in to the same ages. I don't expect to be in public office all of my life. But to the extent that I understand what it's like to get up in the morning and my legs are creaky and I can't do some of the things physically that I could do when I was a younger person. Those things are what my fellow seniors are experiencing. And now the question becomes, what kinds of needs do we have that government has a proper role in delivering, and how do we deliver them? So I think, like the other question where I said we have to do some homework on it, I'll admit we have to do some homework on this area too. And so I think it's good to be honest, and if you don't have an immediate answer, then let's work at getting a decent answer. And when we do this again in the future, we'll have a way to say, what, Steve said this and Linda said this, and you know what we did in response to that? We did this and that and the other thing. And that hopefully is a positive situation.
We actually got one more question.
Yeah, sure.
While you were chatting.
We'll take them right up to the 7 o'clock hour.
So Donato from Eastchester asks, sorry if this was covered already, but George, I was hoping you could tell us what specific things are happening at the county level to respond to the new mental health needs that seniors face because of COVID.
It was very interesting you mentioned that, Donato, because we had a Facebook Live program taped today that will air tomorrow. If you're of the mood to see it tomorrow, I guess we're going to show it about 11 o'clock. We have on Joe Glazer, who's the Deputy Commissioner of Mental Health for Westchester County, and we also have Dr. Joe Ricca, who is the Superintendent of the White Plains School Districts. And together we also have Torian, who's a Program Manager from Mental Health, and that the three of them have a conversation about this very topic, the mental health needs that are coming out of COVID. It is a very stressful time. And I think knowing that you've got certain resources out there, certain hotline information, mental health counselors that we can tap into, you have to know it exists. And so we have to promote it better. But once it's there, it is a lifeline for people who are going through excessive stress. And we're all under stress. We mentioned already about the lifestyle changes of wearing masks and so forth. But the worry factor and the fear that we're going to get a fatal disease, and it's all around us. It could be anywhere we go. That really works on different people in a very profound way. But we do think that our Department of Community Mental Health is out there ready for these things. They've had some sessions and programs about this, and we think they're the good resource to reach out to. And then what I'd normally say in a situation like this, if somebody has a specific need or interest, give us a call, and then we'll be able to make the connection necessary.
Okay. You already mentioned this, but we're getting a lot of comments from people who want to know what they should do, who they should contact if they want to be a poll worker.
Okay. Yeah, I think I'll say the number again. Westchester Board of Elections, 995-5700. They're located at 25 Quaropus Street. That's a good Indian name. 25 Quaropus Street in downtown White Plains, just a block from where we're sitting right now. Obviously, if you're in the area, you can stop in and express your interest, but more likely you call 995-5700. They'll probably ask you to send something by email to them. And if you're interested in being a poll worker, you'll be entitled, if you're selected, go through some training, $350 for a long day of work, but you'll be right in the heart of things, and you will not be bored this election day. I think we're going to see a big turnout and a lot of people very engaged in the political process. Maybe too engaged. Maybe a little calmness would help us get through the cycle. But if they're interested, that's the way to do it. Board of Elections, 995-5700. So for anyone who has any questions they think of later, usually the best questions you think of are the ones that come after the program is over. You're welcome to contact us at communications@westchestergov.com, and gov is G-O-V. So communications@westchestergov.com. Send your emails there, and we'll try to answer them or refer them to somebody in our administration who can give you greater detail. The general number for Westchester County is 995-2000. The general switchboard operator will connect with whomever you'd like. You can ask to speak to May Carpenter in the Senior Services Programs Department. You can ask for our office, County Executive Office. That direct line is 995-2900. And if you have a question about a specific issue, criminal justice issue, housing issue that involves veterans, that involves any transportation, Beeline bus system, you call. We'll do our very best to answer it for you if we can. These Facebook Town Hall programs will continue. We'll have a series of them. I mentioned that in 2 weeks, on September 16th, we'll be talking about our economic recovery plans, where we are in the aftermath of COVID and where we have to go. That'll be hopefully an interesting conversation. We certainly appreciate you tuning in, and I gather this is going to be available for people to see on an ongoing basis. So if you missed any part of it and you want to tune in, if the games get rained out and you can't watch a baseball game tonight, then you can watch Facebook Live with Westchester County again. I'm George Latimer, Westchester County Executive. Thanks for tuning in. We hope to see you the next time. We'll try to stay in touch on the issues that matter to you. Have a good day.